German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, we catch up with you here in South Africa, your last stop on your first Africa trip. You started in Senegal, you went on to Niger. Your predecessor, Angela Merkel, put a focus on Africa. What does it feel like for you now to touch down here for the first time as German Chancellor?
Africa is the continent next to Europe, and it is of essence that we work intensely to have very good relations with all the states in Africa. And also it is important that we develop our relations with all the democratic states on the globe. Democracy, the rule of law, questions that are important for us are not just something that is linked with the so-called Western countries. It's also very important if we look at all the countries in the world. So South Africa is a democracy, Senegal, Niger, and this is why I visited them and why I think it is important that we continue to work together, saying that the world has a good future if we cooperate, if we understand that there will be a lot of very relevant states in the future, in the 50s of this century, and that we should now make it feasible that there is a good cooperation, that we can create a multilateral world.
Now, the shadow of the Ukraine conflict looms large here. This is Europe being very much busy with itself. There's a war in Europe. And at the same time, here many countries, particularly those that you visited, are set to feel the brunt of the effects. There's a looming hunger crisis, fuel shortages, fertilizer shortages. What responsibility does Germany feel to save countries that have nothing to do with this conflict from the effects?
First, Russia invaded Ukraine, started a brutal war against the neighbor country, and so it is important that we stick together to give the Ukraine the chance to defend itself, its integrity, its sovereignty. And this is also important for peace on the globe. We should agree that there should never again be a successful attempt to change borders with force. And this is what Russia is trying to do, and this is why we cannot accept this, and this is why so many countries are supporting Ukraine with financial means, with weapons also, and we developed a sanctions regime against Russia to convince the Russian leadership that they should go away from the war, that they should start negotiations with the Ukraine, and that they withdraw the troops from Ukraine territory where they invaded the country. And on the other hand, it is obvious that a lot of countries are suffering from this war and from the Russian aggression, and this is why we are very decided that we will help the countries that are suffering. This is why we started to cooperate in fighting against all the consequences of having not enough food, of supporting the countries with their own economic difficulties they have. And this is why we also speak about how we can work together in this very difficult crisis. But the best thing to do is ending the war, and if Russia stopped its aggression and would be ready for a peace, this would be the best for the whole globe.
What concrete assistance can countries like, for instance, Sudan, Somalia, Niger expect?
We are working on supporting the World Food Programme, and we are starting together an initiative against the shortages that are coming up now, and we will work together with the countries on a global level, together with the United Nations, and this is what we are trying to convince all other countries that have the means to do so to do together with us.
Your Trade Minister, Robert Habeck, also spoke about a US-EU initiative to lower fuel prices worldwide. Can you flesh that out a bit?
We will have a very difficult situation if we look at fuel prices. Obviously, this will be not feasible to subsidize them down, and even not on a global level. But it is necessary that we start to increase the supply with gas, with fuel, with all the things to make it feasible for the countries to pay for their bill.
So how will you get fuel shortages off the table, reduce prices?
We are now discussing with all these countries that are exploring oil and gas and trying to convince them to increase their capacities, so this would help the world market.
Now it's 3 months to the day today that Russia invaded Ukraine. You're one of the very few world leaders who actually still have a direct line to Vladimir Putin. Volodymyr Zelensky, Ukraine's president, at the World Economic Forum spoke of Putin's intention to cause maximum damage, the maximum loss of lives. Many people are wondering whether Putin has lost touch with reality. What is your impression when you speak to him?
This is a brutal aggression, a very brutal war, and it is really an imperialistic approach. He tries to conquer parts of the territory of his neighbor country, and this is what we will not be able, we will never accept. And this is why it is necessary that we support the Ukraine, as I already mentioned, and that we, on the other hand, talk directly to Putin, saying him that he should stop the war, and that the activity he is starting there, the war, will never have a good outcome for his own country. We should not forget that the sanctions, for instance, are having a very heavy impact on the Russian economy today, but also in the future. They will go back in their opportunities of economic development for decades, so they will suffer, and they are suffering. And for getting out of this, he has to stop the war.
Now, the United Nations says for the first time there's some 100 million people fleeing conflict on the move around the globe. Germany is negotiating also with many countries to take so-called illegal migrants back. What will Germany do? What will you do as G7 presidency to open avenues for legal migration?
We have to be aware that there are a lot of people that are in a very desperate situation, that are fleeing from the places they lived because of war, because of a lot of other reasons. And so we have a global responsibility to support the refugees where they are. And this is what we never should forget, that there is a responsibility, not just starting if, for instance, refugees are coming to the Western countries and trying to live there. We also have to do a lot at the places where they live. In most cases, they're just fled to the neighbor country, and this neighbor country needs assistance for being able to cope with the situation. On the other hand, it is obvious that there will be the need for legal ways of migration, for instance, to Europe, and that we have to find a way to cooperate with the countries where the people are looking for the chances to start a better life in European countries, in other countries of the world. And doing this is then also an answer to fight against illegal migration, because this also needs cooperation between the countries, making it feasible that people go back to the country of origin if they cannot stay in the country they wanted to go.
I just want to talk about the Sahel region, because it's a great source of instability that leads to migration as well. How concerned are you that you might be supporting the wrong side by extending one of the mandates in Mali after the coup?
We are supporting the United Nations with their activity in Sahel, and especially in Mali with this so-called MINUSMA mandate. And this is something that is good for stabilization in the region, but we also state very clear that we will never accept a situation where there will be a fight with the support of Russian soldiers in Mali against the people. So it is necessary that they are going back to the path of a democratic perspective.
You speak of a special responsibility that you feel for contributing to the future being a multipolar world. How does Germany's, Europe's colonial past shape the way you want to integrate particularly African countries?
Germany, but all countries with a colonial past, have to be very honest in admitting that this past is part of their history and that they have responsibility for better relations with the countries, for instance, in Africa. And doing this is also the basis for a good relationship in the future. And my view is that the world will have a lot of very influential countries in the next decades that are not just Russia, China, United States and Europe, for instance. It will be also a lot of other countries. And this is one of the reasons why I, for instance, invited Indonesia and India, Senegal and South Africa or Argentina to participate in our G7 meeting in Germany this year and this summer, because it's a starting point for understanding the world. It's something that we have a responsibility together for, and this is the basis for a multilateral world where we not just see a lot of different influential countries, but countries that cooperate for a better future.
What role does Africa play in this? Are you more up against China or Russia here with that vision?
Africa is a continent with a lot of countries that, and states that will have a future that is better than today, that will have a lot of people living there. And so it is necessary that we do all which is feasible to make it happen, that this will be a good future. And cooperation, economic cooperation, support in the development is the basis for this.
What most surprised you on this trip?
It was very good to discuss with the leaders and understanding that they have a very similar view to the world, and that they are also sharing the willingness of cooperation. And this is one of the outcomes of this trip to 3 countries.
And just finally, just a few kilometers from where we are sitting right now, Nelson Mandela was elected the first democratically elected president of South Africa. If you could meet him today, what would you tell him or ask him?
He was really a very great leader and working intensely for freedom and democracy. And I think there is not a question I should have asked him, but the question all asked him really is, how did you make it to stay that situation in the jail for that a long time and keeping to be a very democratic leader? It is really a great man.
Olaf Scholz, Chancellor of Germany, on his first trip to Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you.